Bryony Calvert pressed her fingertips to the cool surface of the conference room table and tried to imagine it was water, some bottomless lake she could dive into and never surface from, but the mahogany refused to soften under her touch. Sunlight ricocheted off the mirrored skyline of downtown Dallas and knifed through the floor-to-ceiling glass, glinting on legal pads, Montblanc pens, and the single platinum ring box sitting like unexploded ordnance at center court. Around her, 3 men discussed her life as though she were a convertible bond, attractive in theory, burdensome in practice unless merged with the proper asset. Her step-uncle, Roman Calvert, lounged at the head of the table, a tan line from last month's Majorca regatta still ghosting his collar. He spoke in the unhurried baritone of someone born convinced the world would meet his deadlines. Blaze's board will not approve another bridge loan without collateral, he said, lacing his fingers atop a leather folio. Our shares provide that collateral, provided the wedding happens before quarterly reporting. Across from him, Blaze Hawthorne regarded Bryony with eyes the color of stainless steel left out in sleet. Everything about Hawthorne matched the minimalist aesthetic of his defense drone empire: charcoal suit, titanium watch, a haircut sharp enough to breach export regulations. He did not smile, his mouth seemed capable only of straight lines and profit margins. He lifted the ring box with a precision usually reserved for surgical instruments and slid it toward her. Custom setting, he said in a voice that suggested the detail was a courtesy rather than a kindness. 5 carats. Sign the prenup today, we can have the ceremony Tuesday. Private jet to Santorini for a combined honeymoon investor tour. Minimal disruption to your schedule. My schedule currently includes breathing, Bryony replied, forcing her voice to stay inside the lines of civility. That requires me to remain conscious, which your itinerary would threaten. Roman shot her a warning glare over his rimless spectacles. Bree, this is business. Your parents understood alliances, they'd expect you to do the sensible thing. A familiar ache ballooned behind her sternum at the mention of her parents, aviation pioneers whose small plane crashed 9 years ago had left her heir to a dormant aerospace patent portfolio and Roman's guardianship. She wondered what they would make of this boardroom betrothal. Probably they'd laugh, then give Blaze a crash course in stall recovery maneuvers that involved parachutes and prayer. Blaze flipped open a manila folder and angled it so she could see her own name typed above the word spousal trust agreement. Your trust gets diluted either way, he said. With me, you keep voting power in a combined 37% block. Without me, Calvert Venture Holdings defaults and your equity dissolves. I'm offering preservation, not romance. And if I want neither preservation nor romance? Then you want bankruptcy, Roman snapped. This is the solution on the table, Bryony. Sign, take the weekend to shop for a dress, and by next Wednesday the analysts will hail you as a savior of 2 legacy brands. 2 years ago she might have caved to that argument, she had swallowed harder pills to keep Roman's approval. But something about the calm finality in Blaze Hawthorne's tone derailed her obedience. She pictured waking beside this man whose primary passion was quarterly EBITDA, living under non-disclosure clauses that outlawed ordinary mistakes, surrendering her first child to a team of nannies vetted by Defense Department algorithms. A tremor ran through her wrists. She folded her hands in her lap to hide it. I'll need time to read, she said, lifting the prenup with the same caution one might reserve for a venomous spider. 27 pages, single-spaced, clauses on fidelity, fertility, publicity rights. She found herself searching for any single line that acknowledged her as a human rather than an economic sweetener. There was none. Roman exhaled theatrically. How much time? The market won't wait for cold feet. Tomorrow is my birthday, she said. I'd rather not spend it memorizing indemnity language. Blaze checked his watch. Fine. Midnight tomorrow. After that your assets convert to subordinated debt and our lawyers proceed without ceremony. He pushed back his chair. Roman, I'll expect the signed terms by Sunday. Without another glance at her, he left, leaving the door quivering in its frame. Roman rose slower, gathering his folio. You think you're cornered but you're not, he said, softening his tone as though dressing a wound he'd just inflicted. "Marry him, steer the company into the next decade, and in 5 years you'll thank me." She mustered a brittle smile. "In 5 years we'll see who's bankrupt, Uncle Ro." When the door closed behind him, Bryony sagged in her chair, pulse jackhammering. Across the table the ring box sat open now, the diamond winking an LED cold promise. She nudged it shut, slid the prenup pages into her tote, and walked out. The elevator ride to the lobby lasted only 30 seconds, yet by the time she stepped onto marble floors she had plotted an escape vector. Not a negotiation, not a plea, an exit. She texted her assistant to pack a carry-on, jeans, hoodie, her parents' flight log notebook, and the titanium credit card attached to a trust fund Roman couldn't freeze without her signature. She booked the 10:05 p.m. American Airlines red-eye to Boston, one of the few routes with seats left on a Friday, because the city was far enough to spark gossip yet close enough to sprint back if courage failed. 40 minutes later she sped down Northfield Avenue in a rideshare, Dallas twilight strobed red gold across mirrored towers. She dialed her stepuncle's office, left a single-line voicemail, "I need time offline, please delay further meetings," and powered off the phone. The driver glanced in the mirror when she exhaled a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "To the airport?" he asked. "To a different latitude," she answered, gripping the armrest as though acceleration alone might rewrite destiny. In the terminal she bypassed the Admiral's Club, too many venture types, and found a quiet bar near gate D27. One whiskey neat slowed her heartbeat, a second burned the prenup's legalese out of her throat. At 9:47 the boarding group for Zone 3 formed. She joined, shoulders squared, totes slung like contraband. On the jetway she looked back only once, half expecting Roman security aide to appear with a temporary restraining order. No one came. She stepped into the cabin smelling of recycled air and possibility, found seat 14B, and stowed her bag. The stranger who claimed 14A dashed in last minute, breathless, parka dusted with snow, an early arrival from northern latitudes. Their eyes met over the seat divider, his startled charcoal, hers defiant hazel. "Rough night?" he asked, buckling in. "About to get rougher," she said. As the plane pushed back and the city shrank to a galaxy of sodium lights, Bryony allowed herself one reckless prayer, that somewhere above the cloud deck lay a version of her life not yet circumscribed by contracts or cold-eyed CEOs. She didn't know the man beside her would hold the map to that universe, or that by sunrise she would wager her reputation on a plan scrawled across a cocktail napkin. For the first time since the crash that orphaned her, the horizon felt wider than the runway. And the engines, throttling up for takeoff, sounded remarkably like freedom. The cabin lights dimmed to a sleepy indigo while flight attendants performed their balletic safety demo, but Bryony felt neither drowsy nor safe. Her pulse still ferried echoes of that boardroom ultimatum, even as the aircraft nosed above Dallas-Fort Worth's nocturnal sprawl. She opened the leather notebook that had belonged to her father, blank pages now except for one Polaroid of a Cessna on a Wyoming airstrip, and pretended to read. Anything to avoid meeting the eyes of the man in 14A, who had already noticed she was vibrating like an overtaxed servo. He broke the silence first, voice pitched low so neighboring rows wouldn't hear. "I'm not great at small talk, but you look like someone who's trying to outthink a grenade pin." His accent was American but carried northern grit, the consonants clipped, the vowels crisp as iced cider. She flicked him a sideways glance, angular face, days-old stubble, dark blonde hair mashed by a wool beanie he evidently hadn't bothered to remove. His parka bore a faded Noah patch, its hem crusted with what looked suspiciously like salt rime. "If I were, would you have a blueprint for containing blast radius?" she asked, half teasing, half daring him to sustain the metaphor. He smiled, quick, lopsided, more curious than flirtatious. "I'm a robotics engineer. Containing disasters is kind of the gig." He extended a hand. "Logan Thorne." His palm was still chilled from the tarmac. She introduced herself only as Bryony, tucking the Calvert surname away like contraband. They exchanged the usual niceties. He was connecting to Boston after a scientific charter out of McMurdo Station. She claimed she was visiting friends, but subtext flickered between sentences. When she asked about the Antarctic patch, he brightened, explaining how autonomous rigs drilled ice cores while he babysat code in -30-degree wind. He spoke with hands as much as lips, sketching shapes in cabin air, a habit that betrayed someone more comfortable debugging algorithms than navigating cocktail parties. Their conversation ebbed when the drinks trolley reached row 14. Bryony ordered whiskey neat, Logan chose black coffee heavy on sugar. When the attendant moved on, he regarded her tumbler and quipped, "That's a statement pour." "Necessary ballast," she replied, tipping the glass. "My life's center of gravity shifted today." "Wanna reprioritize?" he asked, then winced. "Sorry, engineer joke. But if you do need to talk, I've got 6 hours of insomnia to donate." She surprised herself by answering. Words tumbled, the arranged merger marriage, the diamond like a GPS tracker, the Sunday prenup deadline. She used no company names, but context bled through. Logan didn't interrupt, he listened with an intensity that felt like standing beneath a polar aurora, silent, vivid, patiently unfolding. When she finished, he leaned back, palms steepled behind his head, eyes on the seatbelt sign as if studying mission parameters. Finally he said, "You need an impedance mismatch. English, please. Introduce noise big enough that the circuit, in this case, the wedding plan, can't close. Your uncle wants optics, your fiancé wants leverage. Give them risk instead. They'll bail or renegotiate on your terms." Her laugh came brittle. "And how would I do that by, say, tomorrow night? Manufacture a controversy that makes you temporarily untouchable. Something that stains their timeline, not your soul." He sipped his coffee, then added, "For example, disappear with a stranger and let the social media furnace run hot for 48 hours. Heat flashed up Bryony's neck. "You're proposing I stage a fling?" "Stage, improvise, semantics." His grin turned boyish. "All it takes is time-stamped photographs, a paper trail of hotel receipts, a plausible story arc. Shareholders hate uncertainty. They'll beg for postponement until the dust settles." She eyed him, gauging sincerity. Cabin darkness deepened, outside, stars skated along the wing's edge. "That's diabolical." "Diabolical is roping someone into marriage to prop a stock price." He lifted one shoulder. "But you'd need a co-conspirator. Someone with no ties to your corporate cabal. Someone like you." Logan set his coffee down. "Look, I'm not angling for, whatever you think. I fly back to Antarctica in a month. I have nothing to gain from wrecking your fiancé's empire. But I do know how to design a watertight alibi. Why help me?" He studied her a long moment, and she realized his eyes were not gray as first thought but a stark winter green. "Because you look like a person who's been drafted into a war she never declared." His smile softened. "And because I'm terrible at watching injustice idle." The aircraft hit mild turbulence, seatbelt signs chimed. She clutched the armrest, more rattled by his kindness than the air pocket. "This feels insane." "Innovation usually does at 30,000 feet, he murmured. "Tell you what. We land at 3 a.m. I check us into a respectable hotel, separate rooms, your choice. We take some PG-13 selfies in the lobby bar, doctor the EXIF stamps, and leak them by breakfast. If at any point you want out, you say, 'engine failure,' and I vanish. Deal?" Bryony's heart pounded loud enough she feared he could hear. She glanced at her father's notebook on her lap, the Polaroid of the Cessna, her parents grinning into Wyoming sunlight, fearless. They had always said the sky rewards audacity. Maybe the ground sometimes did, too. She inhaled, tasted recycled oxygen and possibility. "Deal," she said, extending her hand. They shook, one beat, two, and something real sparked beneath the pretense. She wondered if Logan felt it, but his grip released politely, nothing lingering. Yet when he settled back, he left his forearm on the shared armrest, not touching but close enough that warmth bled through millimeters of cabin air. It felt like consent to shared turbulence ahead. Hours passed in a blur of whispered logistics. Logan opened his laptop, coded a dummy Gmail alias called Runaway Quasar, drafted an email to a fan blogger who specialized in heiress gossip, attached no images yet but dangled the promise of hotel suite exclusives. Bryony scrolled her social feeds, liked a random Boston brunch post to establish digital breadcrumbs. Together they planned timeline optics, arrival, champagne, a nightcap by the window overlooking Back Bay lights. Around 2 a.m. the plane began descent over Massachusetts, its wing lights slicing low cloud. Logan closed the laptop, anxiety flicking momentarily across his features. "You sure?" "I have 96 hours before that prenup detonates," she answered. "I'm choosing my own blast radius." The wheels kissed runway. While taxiing, Bryony powered her phone for the first time since gate D27. 43 missed calls from Roman. One unread text from Blaze, decision window closing. "Disappoint me and you'll regret it." She showed Logan. He read, jaw ticking. "Ignore him," Logan said. "We're about to ruin his calculus." They stepped into Logan Night Boston, sleet under sodium lamps, the air smelling of brine and diesel. A rideshare whisked them to the Peveril, a century-old hotel whose facade glowed copper against the storm. Inside, Logan requested the top-floor suite under the name Astra, Bryony's choice, after her mother's favorite constellation. The clerk recognized her instantly. Dallas society pages migrated everywhere, but said nothing except, "Congratulations, Mrs. Astra," while swiping a platinum card. Elevator doors shut, sealing them alone in velvet hush. Bryony's pulse hammered in her ears. Logan watched the floor numbers rise, then cleared his throat. "For what it's worth, I don't think you're running away," he said quietly. "I think you're rerouting." Emotion lodged like gravel in her throat. She managed, "Let's hope we don't crash." "If we do," he murmured, "we build a better black box." Suite 1703 smelled of polish and possibility. Bryony dropped her tote, walked to the panoramic window, and stared at the city, cobblestone streets glossed by wet neon, the harbor swallowing snowflakes whole. Logan moved about wordlessly, unclipping his camera from its padded case, checking battery levels, adjusting aperture. He wasn't playing the rake, he was prepping an experiment. She faced him, heart thrumming. "We need evidence." He raised the lens halfway. "You lead." Suddenly shy, she tugged off her blazer, slipped into one of his flannel shirts he'd offered as prop and pulled it to mid-thigh. The fabric smelled of winter and diesel and distant mountains, an aroma utterly alien to the cologne-soaked boardrooms she inhabited. He swallowed once but stayed behind the camera, professional. She perched on the window bench, bare legs tucked under, city lights draping her in comet trails. Logan snapped 3 shots, then handed her the camera. "Your turn. Make it look mutual." They traded roles, him in rumpled tee, laugh crinkling his eyes as she exaggerated photographer's commands. The giggles were real, shaking off tension. At 3:47 a.m. they reviewed the screen, 2 people flushed with secret knowledge, edges softened by low light. It was damning enough for tabloids yet innocent enough to claim plausible deniability. Bryony exhaled, relief mingling with adrenaline's aftertaste. Phase 1 complete. Logan connected the camera to his laptop, embedded fake timestamps, stripped metadata that revealed the edits. When done, he closed the lid, looked up. "Next step is actually sleeping," he said. "You take the bedroom. I'll crash on the sofa." She should have said goodnight. Instead she hovered at the doorway to the master suite, fingers on the jamb. Rain lashed glass harder, as if urging confession. She whispered, "If I asked you to stay, would that change anything?" He set the laptop on the coffee table, crossed the rug until inches separated them. "Everything," he said, voice hoarse. But only if you want everything to change. Her answer was to rise on tiptoes and kiss him, light at first, almost theoretical. The taste of coffee and sugar dissolved into whiskey and raw necessity. He responded with a soft groan, palms cupping her face, and the kiss deepened, no longer evidence but event. Clothes scattered like time-stamped alibis. They found the bed eventually, after colliding with the sofa's arm, after knocking a hotel brochure onto the carpet. Somewhere a digital clock reordered minutes into constellations. When they finally stilled, sweat damp, breath synced, Bryony pressed her forehead to Logan's and whispered a truth stranger than any fiction they'd spun. I don't know what tomorrow's headlines will say, but tonight feels honest. He brushed hair from her cheek. Then let the world call it scandal. We'll know it's simply course correction. Outside, dawn crept toward the Atlantic, ready to ignite news feeds with rumors of a runaway heiress and the nameless stranger who'd intercepted her flight path. Inside Suite 17032 fugitives from expectation slept tangled in each other's gravity, unaware that the first of many explosive push notifications was already pulsing across Dallas screens, rewriting the arithmetic of power by adding one unpredictable variable, love in open rebellion. Bryony woke to the rasp of rain against the sweet skylight and a vibration under her cheek that turned out to be Logan's heartbeat. For a few gauzy seconds the last 12 hours felt like a lucid dream, the flight, the whispered conspiracy, the avalanche-bright intimacy that had left her legs deliciously weak. Then her phone, somewhere beneath the duvet, began detonating with notifications. She disentangled herself, found the device, and watched a red counter climb past 200 unread. Logan stirred, expression sliding from soft contentment to soldier on alert. She tapped the first alert. Dallas Morning Ledger had pushed a banner, runaway Calvert heiress spotted in Boston hotel with mystery man. Underneath, a time-stamped still from the Peveril's lobby camera showed her laughing in Logan's borrowed flannel while he hauled their suitcase. The image felt both alien and intimate, the headline's greediness made her stomach pitch. More outlets followed, Page 6, Meridian Finance, even a French gossip feed that called Logan un baroudeur du Pôle Sud, a vagabond of the South Pole. Stock ticker widgets scrolled under the articles, Hawthorne Industries down 7% pre-market. Roman's name popped in several pieces as the aggrieved guardian. Logan, now propped on one elbow, scanned her screen upside down. Looks like Phase 2 triggered itself. I didn't think it would spread this fast, she whispered. That elevator cam did half our work. He reached for his phone, found only a single text, from an unlisted Dallas number. He read aloud, return my property, or I'll litigate your life until it fits in a shoebox. He lifted an eyebrow. Blaze, I presume. A knock, firm and official, rattled the suite's double doors. Bryony's pulse rocketed. Logan snagged jeans, slid into them, and crossed the carpet barefoot. Before opening, he flicked the chain latch so the door cracked only 3 inches. A hotel security manager in blazer and earpiece waited in the hall, flanked by 2 Boston police officers. Sir, sorry to disturb. We need Ms. Calvert to accompany us downstairs. A Mr. Hawthorne has reported her missing and possibly under duress. Logan's voice stayed calm. She isn't missing. She's my registered guest, quite free to leave whenever. The manager's gaze dropped to Logan's bare chest, then over his shoulder to Bryony wrapped in a sheet. All the same, ma'am, we must confirm you're here of your own volition. Bryony stepped forward, chin high. I'm perfectly safe. Mr. Hawthorne is not my guardian and has no jurisdiction over me. One officer cleared his throat. If you'll just sign a short statement to that effect, we'll close the file. Logan fetched a robe, and Bryony donned it like armor. She signed the paper, thanked them with an equanimity she didn't feel, and waited until footsteps retreated down the corridor. Then she sagged against the door. Logan squeezed her shoulder. He's escalating faster than forecast. He hates uncertainty, she said. My uncle's the same. They'll keep swinging until something breaks. Then we give them something else to hit. He opened his laptop on the dining table, daylight glowing through rain-spattered panes. Time to release the next breadcrumb, investment angle. You mentioned your inheritance holds early-stage aerospace patents. Bryony nodded, tying the robe tighter. Her mind lit with an old memory, her parents sketching winglets on graph paper, laughing over coffee. None of them are market-ready, but the IP library is public record. Logan's fingers danced over keys. What if the runaway heiress invests her dormant IP into a climate tech startup? That reframes the narrative, from scandal to strategic partnership. She perched beside him, catching the cedar and snow scent of his damp hair. You mean Iceforge? He hesitated. Disclosure, Iceforge was stealth. Journal submission drops next quarter. But if we leak that you've just poured Calvert patents into my company, Hawthorne's board will panic. They'll see you as a potential competitor rather than a bargaining chip. Bryony considered. Roman tracks every dime I spend. If he believes my fortune's tied to yours, he can't threaten to freeze it without tanking public sympathy. Manipulative, but effective, Logan said. We'll announce a joint press briefing here at noon. Enough time for reporters to scramble. Rain intensified, drumming like artillery on the window. Bryony watched street traffic spray fan-shaped wakes through puddles. What if Blaze barges in? Security will block him, the hotel's PR loves free publicity. Worst case, he makes a scene on live feed, and shareholders see his temper unfiltered. Bryony brushed stray hair behind her ear, another tremor. I've never run a press conference. I freeze when cameras point. Logan closed the laptop, turned to her fully. I can handle the tech spiel. You just tell them why you won't be auctioned. Speak from that place inside you that bucked $1 billion ultimatum. She swallowed. What if that place goes mute? He cupped her cheeks. Then look at me. Pretend it's just us in row 14, plotting revolution on a napkin. Heat flooded her throat. She kissed him once, quick, grounding, then pulled away. First I need clothes. Something less incriminating. 20 minutes later they stepped into the corridor, Bryony in dark jeans, a storm-gray cashmere turtleneck borrowed from Logan's duffel, hair in a decisive knot, Logan in a navy button-down that somehow dignified his expedition boots. They took the service elevator to avoid lobby gawkers and slid through staff corridors to the business center where Logan printed a single-page press sheet. By mid-morning the hotel ballroom buzzed like an apiary. Camera rigs sprouted among rented ferns, bloggers live-streamed from ring lights, and a CNBC crew commandeered the central aisle. When Bryony and Logan stepped onto the little dais, murmurs spiked, microphones thrust forward, flashes strobing. Logan opened with brisk context, an Antarctic expedition's accidental discovery of a bacterium that extrudes graphene-grade ribbons, a prototype reactor in Cambridge, a need for aerospace patents to integrate biosynthesized composites into lightweight fuselage skins. He introduced Bryony as lead strategic architect and founding investor. The crowd inhaled as if coordinates of buried treasure had been revealed. Then it was her turn. Spotlights bleached the audience into a wash of silhouettes. Her heartbeat thrashed louder than the PA system. She sought Logan's gaze, steady, green ice calm, and words found their runway. My parents taught me that innovation is a promise to the future, not a shortcut for the present, she began, voice surprisingly clear. Today I'm cashing in that promise on a project immune to coercion. No boardroom, no prenup, no fear can dictate who we choose to build the future with. A reporter barked, is this partnership the reason you fled Dallas with Mr. Thorne? Heat tingled along her collar, but she held the woman's stare. I didn't flee. I navigated. And as of this morning, every share I own stands behind Iceforge. Another hand shot up, Reuters, sharp suit. Are you still engaged to Blaze Hawthorne? Bryony felt Logan stiffen beside her. She inhaled. I never accepted his proposal. She opened her father's notebook, displayed the Polaroid of the Cessna, its edges worn soft. My future once lived in that airplane, exploration, risk, unfiltered sky. I will not trade it for a ring forged in leverage. The room erupted, some cheers, some gasps, an audible, holy shit, near the back. Through the din Bryony sensed a disturbance at the ballroom doors. Blaze Hawthorne strode in, umbrella dripping, face carved from contempt. Hotel security flanked him but didn't dare physical restraint amid so many cameras. He halted 10 feet from the dais, voice slicing above chatter. You're in breach of fiduciary duty, Miss Calvert. Your trust agreement forbids reckless investment. A surge of fear tightened Bryony's spine. Logan stepped forward, mic in hand. Section 12B of that agreement, he said, defines reckless as any venture lacking peer-reviewed validation. Good news, my Antarctic paper cleared preprint review yesterday. Congratulations, Blaze, you're up to date. Laughter rippled. Blaze's nostrils flared. He jabbed a finger at Logan. You think you can insulate her? I have lawyers who eat startups for breakfast. Breakfast ends at noon, Logan replied serenely, tapping his watch. Might want to hurry. Cameras caught everything, Blaze's crimson flush, his pivot toward Bryony, the hissed threat picked up by boom mics, this will end you. Then security escorts finally intervened, guiding him out amidst a fusillade of flashes. Investors watching live saw not a titan but a tyrant unmasked. When the doors closed, Bryony felt trembling in her knees. Logan's hand found the small of her back, grounding her without theatrics. Reporters still shouted questions, but the narrative had pivoted. Blaze looked petty, Bryony principled, Logan visionary. Stock trackers on phones lit green for Calvert Venture Holdings, sympathy bounce. Hawthorne Industries, red. The conference wound down, hotel staff herded media toward coffee urns. Bryony and Logan retreated to a service hallway lined with carts of china. She laughed once, half giddy, half shell-shocked, then sagged against the wall. You were brilliant, Logan said. I was terrified. Good. Terror keeps hubris in check. She tilted her head. What now? He won't stop. Then we keep moving. Publish the full Iceforge patent dossier, lock in Department of Energy interest. Make ourselves too public to squash. Water dripped from Logan's hair onto his collar. Bryony reached to swipe it away, fingertips lingering on his pulse. I should feel guilty, she murmured, but all I feel is alive. No guilt in outmaneuvering a bully. He leaned in, resting his forehead against hers. Besides, we haven't even deployed the nuclear option. She arched a brow. Which is? My mother's lemon cheddar scones. Guaranteed to win over any skeptical board. He grinned, boyish again. She laughed so hard relief cracked open like sun through thunderheads. A rhythmic ping vibrated his phone. He checked it, eyes widening. Speaking of boards, look. Calyx chassis. Not in this story. Here could be an Iceforge advisory board ping. Let's finish. He showed her an email thread, inquiries from 3 venture funds, plus a personal note from the Department of Energy's deputy director requesting a Monday meeting. Exposure had detonated opportunity faster than fear. Bryony exhaled, feeling the paradigm shift under her boots. We just lit a fuse. Then let's build the rocket before it reaches the powder. They left the hallway hand in hand, stepping back into the ballroom's frenetic aftermath, unaware that Blaze Hawthorne had already boarded a charter to Washington with a folder of counterattacks, or that Roman Calvert, watching the live stream in his corner office, had whispered one rueful sentence, the child grew wings after all. Outside, sleet turned to snow, shrouding Boston in chaotic beauty, an omen, perhaps, that storms could be repurposed into flight paths when navigated by the right 2 souls. Snow pasted itself in wet streaks against the taxi's windows as Bryony and Logan rode back to the Peveril, the leather seats cold despite February's best efforts at spring. The driver kept the radio on a low murmur, NPR droning about currency swings, but Bryony barely heard the words. Her mind ran reel-to-reel through each frame of the press conference, the blinding strobes, the audible gasp when she declared the wedding dead, Blaze's voice lashing the room like a bullwhip. One part of her savored the newscrawl already looping on airport televisions, Runaway Heiress backs Antarctic graphene startup, but another whispered that she had climbed beyond familiar oxygen. The air up here, where reputations combusted in real time, could suffocate if she made a single misstep. Logan must have sensed the descent of her thoughts, because he reached across the seat and laced their fingers, no grand gesture, just a quiet splice. "Big day," he said, the understatement breaking a tiny dam in her chest. She exhaled, the first deep breath in what felt like years. The hotel lobby erupted when the revolving doors spat them inside. Guests clustered behind velvet ropes, angling phones for a second-hand snapshot. Bellmen looked torn between professional stoicism and urgent selfies. A concierge herded them to a service elevator usually reserved for linen carts. Inside the mirrored box Bryony noticed mascara smudges she hadn't had time to correct. Logan's stubble made him look less CEO, more renegade professor. Strangely, the imperfections calmed her, they looked authentic. Unscripted. Suite 1703 smelled of stale coffee and victory. On the dining table sat a tower of courier envelopes and a silver laptop pinging Slack messages. An IceForge engineer in Cambridge had created a channel named #PressFlood and the feed scrolled faster than her eyes could track. Wall Street Journal requests comment, Bloomberg wants live demo, DOE wants Monday deck. Logan scanned the logs, jaw flexing with focus, then clicked open a secure tunnel to the IceForge server farm. While code cascaded on his screen, diagnostics on the graphene bioreactor, she made for the minibar, found only pretzels and a 2-ounce bottle of bar-grade bourbon. She poured half into a hotel glass, swirled it like medicine. A tap on the suite door made her freeze. Logan muted his keyboard, they exchanged a look, Blaze again. Roman? She peered through the peephole and saw a familiar shock of pepper-gray hair, her step-uncle's security chief, Aldous Crane. He stood alone, snow melting on the shoulders of an overcoat too thin for Boston. Bryony cracked the door but kept the chain. "Mr. Crane. Roman sent you." Aldous's eyes, soft, incongruously kind for a man rumored to bench-press his weight in political favors, looked pained. "Your uncle's boardroom is a hornet's nest, Miss Calvert. He asked me to deliver a message privately. Slide it under the door." Aldous obeyed, pushing a sealed envelope along the carpet. "Please at least read it before you do anything irreversible." He retreated without further persuasion. The corridor swallowed him. She locked up, slit the envelope. Inside, 3 items. First, a photocopy of a term sheet, Roman pledging Calvert Ventures' entire voting stake to Hawthorne Industries as loan collateral. Second, a notarized petition seeking emergency conservatorship over her trust assets on grounds of mental duress. Third, a yellow post-it in Roman's handwriting, Bree, you still have until midnight Sunday. Don't destroy what your parents built. Her pulse crashed like a cymbal. She slapped the documents on the table. Logan read, color draining from his winter-burned cheeks. "He's trying to freeze your assets by questioning your competency. That petition could land me in court Monday morning," she said, voice gone thin. "A judge could lock everything until a psychiatric evaluation." Logan paced. "Roman's gambling the press frenzy makes you look unstable." "He's not wrong," she muttered, collapsing into a chair. "Walk away from a good marriage, invest millions in a bacteria story, shack up with a stranger. It could read manic." Logan knelt so their eyes were level. "Then we counter with ironclad governance. You join IceForge's board tonight. File with the SEC before Roman's freeze request hits. If a federal document shows you acting as director of a public-facing company, a judge will hesitate to declare you incompetent. But we're not listed. So we file a Reg A+ offering, mini-public. I draft the S-1, my counsel in Cambridge can timestamp it. He squeezed her knees, anchoring her to the moment. We fight legal fire with regulatory sunlight. Bryony swallowed panic, nodded. Let's do it. They spent the next 6 hours in a frenzy of keyboards and caffeine. Logan conjured cap table spreadsheets, granting Bryony 32% founder shares in exchange for the Calvert patents. She ironclad a clause stating those shares could never be pledged as collateral to another entity. They drafted board minutes via DocuSign, Logan CEO, Bryony chair, 2 Cambridge professors as independent directors. At 8:12 p.m. Eastern, the SEC's Edgar system returned an accession number. It was like watching a battleship slide down ways into seawater, noisy, irreversible, glorious. Bryony hadn't even changed out of her turtleneck when Slack pinged with a private message tagged urgent. It was from a junior analyst in Hawthorne's finance office, someone she barely knew. The text read, Blaze en route to Boston again, last seen boarding chopper with file labeled Iceforge Biohazard. Wants FDA injunction. Another line followed, keep logs of all threats. Whistleblower statutes protect me if this goes nuclear. Logan read over her shoulder. Biohazard? He'll claim your bacteria is dangerous. She rubbed her temples. We need an independent safety audit. Tonight. I know a virologist at Harvard, Dr. Maeve Ellingson. She owes me from a grant review. He tapped out a call. 15 minutes later Maeve agreed to meet them at her Longwood lab, grant them a BSL-2 assay at midnight. They braved sleet to a rented Jeep, Logan driving, tires skimming puddles that sprayed silver under street lamps. Bryony felt the city's pulse, sirens, slush, neon ghosts, as if sensing whether to accept or reject her rebellion. At Harvard Medical's glass atrium, Maeve welcomed them in scrubs, bemused. While technicians ran PCR to prove the bacterium lacked toxin genes, Bryony watched through a pane, heart-tripping whenever Logan gestured animatedly at charts. He belonged in labs, oxygenated by discovery. Seeing him there tightened something in her chest unrelated to strategy. At 1:03 a.m. Maeve emerged with printouts. Your bug's cleaner than yogurt, she announced. Harmless to mammalian cells, zero virulence islands. Any lawyer waving biohazard claims is either ignorant or malicious. Bryony hugged her, gratitude hot behind her eyes. Logan grinned, relief morphing quickly to fatigue. They thanked Maeve, promised donation to her stem cell project, and slid back to the Jeep. Boston Common lay hushed under a frosting of snow when they parked to breathe air not recycled through crisis. Bryony stared at the white blurred bronze of the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. We countered every move today, but tomorrow they'll invent new ones. Logan rested his head against the seat, profile limned by dashboard glow. We pivot, adapt. Until they tire. They won't tire. Power never tires. Then we outcreate them. He turned, fingers tracing her knuckles. Innovation isn't just product, it's life architecture. Your parents built aircraft because Earth's roads bored them. Let's build a life none of these men can predict. Emotion swelled, nearly painful. She whispered, I'm scared I'll cost you everything. I'll spend everything gladly, he answered, if the yield is us. Snow muffled the world, his words felt louder than sirens. She leaned across the console and kissed him, slow, snow-soft, nothing like the combustion of the first night. It tasted of resolve. Headlights pierced the trance, a black SUV idling behind, engine growling. Logan tensed, eyes on the rearview. The SUV advanced until bumpers nearly touched. Bryony's phone lit with a call from an unknown number. She answered. Blaze's voice, low and lethal, step out, Bryony. We need a conversation without cameras. Logan hit lock on the doors. Not tonight, he shouted, the windshield fogging with their breath. Tires squealed, the SUV swerved, sideswiping the Jeep's rear quarter panel before fishtailing into the night. Bryony clutched Logan's arm, adrenaline blasting through veins. He exhaled a shaky laugh. Well. Physical intimidation, he's down to that. Police arrived within minutes, thanks to a passerby. They filed a report. An officer noted the likely license plate. Logan's hand never left Bryony's back while she spoke. She realized how seamlessly they now operated in tandem, no rehearsal needed. Back at the Peveril after 3 a.m., they found a voicemail from Roman. "Bree, Blaze has lost perspective. Come home, we'll renegotiate." No apology, but a fissure of fear in his tone. Logan poured 2 fingers of hotel scotch, handed her one. "He's blinking." "We can't trust that," she said, but hope glimmered. "If Roman pulls his support, Hawthorne collapses under its own debt." "Tomorrow we let the markets decide," Logan said, clinking her glass. "And you, Chairwoman Calvert, will open trading as the sane, legally documented director of the world's first biographene company." She downed scotch, grimaced. What if sanity is a moving target? Then keep moving. He kissed her temple. Exhaustion folded them onto the couch, her head on his lap, his fingers stroking sleep across her scalp. Morning headlines would trumpet the SEC filing, the safety assay, the hit-and-run report implicating a billionaire CEO. Boards would convene, lawyers draft settlements. But inside Suite 1703, 2 fugitives from expectation surrendered to sleep, knowing tomorrow's storm would test their new architecture, yet certain the frame they'd welded tonight, out of law codes and snow-soaked promises, could flex without snapping. Outside, dawn nudged the horizon with a shimmer like graphene catching first light, impossibly thin, unbelievably strong, ready to sheet the future in shimmer and steel. Dawn poured over Boston Harbor in bruised magenta, but Suite 1703 buzzed with LED blue urgency. Bryony's phone lay between plates of untouched room service eggs, feeding her a ticker of calamities and miracles in alternating bursts. At 9:31 a.m. the bell on CNBC's pre-market show dinged. Hawthorne Industries opened down 19%. 2 minutes later, Iceforge's Reg A filing hit the SEC Daily Digest and #biographene trended hard enough to gouge a canyon through Twitter's sidebar. Logan worked at the window, backlit by winter sunrise, jacket off, sleeves rolled. He'd been on the line since 6, scheduling DOE site visits and drafting a non-dilutive grant pitch. When the trading bell on the NYSE finally clanged, he closed his laptop, crossed to her, and touched the hollow of her shoulder the way a pilot checks rivets before takeoff. "Ready for the courthouse?" he asked. She wasn't, but nodded anyway. Roman's emergency conservatorship hearing had been fast-tracked to 11 a.m. in Suffolk Probate Court, Roman's last chance to freeze her assets before Iceforge money became truly mobile. If the judge believed she'd been coerced or was mentally unstable, he could lock her fortune tighter than any prenup. Logan handed her a cobalt scarf, color of quiet oceans. "Anchor blue," he said. "Wear it if the room lists." The courthouse smelled of old varnish and newer anxiety. Reporters jammed the marble steps, lenses whirring like cicadas. Inside courtroom 3, fluorescent lights rendered everyone equally wan, Roman at the petitioner's table flanked by 2 attorneys, Bryony with Logan and a lone trust law specialist she'd hired at dawn. Across the aisle loomed Blaze Hawthorne, not a party to the petition but determined to watch her tether snap. He sat erect, gloved hands resting on a cane he didn't need, an affectation meant to broadcast gravitas. His eyes tracked Bryony with chilled satisfaction. Judge Celia Gomez, a woman whose reputation for shredding flimsy motions was legend, called the room to order. Roman's lead counsel sprang up, reciting buzzwords: undue influence, impulsive dissipation, a fever dream investment in unproven biomaterials. He produced color printouts of last night's tabloid stills, Bryony in flannel, Logan in t-shirt, the pair evidently drunk on rebellion. When it was their turn, Bryony's lawyer slid the SEC accession number across the bench. Exhibit A, respondent executed legal governance as director of Iceforge, a company now under DOE review. That is neither reckless nor incompetent, it is fiduciary diligence. Bryony rose next, scarf gleaming like a standards flag. She spoke only to Roman. If my parents taught me anything, it's that capital cowers and courage builds. Today I choose courage. Please stand down, uncle. The courtroom stilled. Roman's shoulders sagged, decades of boardroom bravado seemed to leak out all at once. He whispered to his counsel, who turned white. Then Roman himself stood. Your Honor, the petitioner withdraws. Gasps pinged off oak paneling. Gomez arched a brow but nodded. Motion to dismiss granted. A hiss of triumph escaped Bryony before dread replaced it. Blaze's expression hadn't shifted. He rose with predator uncoil. Your Honor, if I may. You may not, Judge Gomez snapped. You are not counsel in this matter. Blaze pivoted, coat flaring. I will be shortly. Ms. Calvert's airborne bacteria threatens national security. An FDA injunction is being filed as we speak. Logan stepped forward. Your Honor, Exhibit B. He handed over Harvard's safety assay, stamped and signed at 1:03 a.m., clear and certified by Dr. Maeve Ellingson, Chief of Virology. No pathogenicity. If Mr. Hawthorne files, he does so in bad faith. Gomez skimmed, then leveled Blaze a stare capable of freezing magma. Court will remember counsel who weaponize panic. She banged the gavel. Adjourned. Outside, flashbulbs erupted. Roman tried to catch Bryony's arm, but she sidestepped. I never wanted you institutionalized, he blurted. Blaze cornered me with debt covenants, threatened a margin call that would nuke the venture fund. I panicked. She saw the strained spider webbing his eyes and believed him. Then testify if this gets criminal, she said, softer than anger but harder than pity. Otherwise stay clear. Roman retreated into the press scrum. Bryony turned, just in time for Blaze to seize opportunity. He strode up, cane tapping like a metronome of doom, and spoke low. You won today. Next time I'll bring scorched earth. Logan angled himself between them. You already tried that last night, remember? Boston PD found traffic cam footage, expect a summons. Blaze's mask cracked, only a millimeter, but enough. He wheeled away, coat whipped by wind. A car whisked Bryony and Logan to Cambridge for the DOE walkthrough. By mid-afternoon men in lanyards and cautious smiles inspected Iceforge's humming bioreactors. Bryony watched Logan translate genome graphs into layman's poetry. She watched engineers twice his age nod like disciples. When one official asked about Capitol Runway, Logan deferred to Chairwoman Calvert. She laid out a financing plan so cogent the man murmured, I wish half our grantees came in this prepared. The moment the delegation left, Logan whooped, scooping her into a spin until safety goggles clattered off his head. The jubilance lasted until dusk, when a CNN alert lit every phone in the lab. FAA grounds Hawthorne Industries drone fleet pending investigation of falsified collision avoidance data. The leak had finally ignited. Iceforge staff erupted into applause, but Bryony walked to a quiet corner, adrenaline giving way to tremor. Logan followed. You okay? She stared at the crimson banner on her screen. I wanted him checked, not crippled. He did this to himself, Logan said gently. And you gave regulators the flashlight. She exhaled. Roman's fund will crater when Hawthorne stock implodes. Collateral damage of truth. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. It's not on you to cushion every fall. His nearness, the smell of lab ethanol and pine soap, steadied her. Take me home, she whispered. Home was Suite 1703, still littered with legal pads and coffee dregs. Through rain-blurred glass, the city smeared like melted neon. Logan brewed chamomile. They sat on the floor, backs to the couch, knees touching. What now? She asked the dark. We hire a real COO, he said. We scale the reactor. We license to Airbus. He paused, voice softer. And we find an apartment with fewer paparazzi outside. She tipped her head onto his shoulder. One with a balcony. I like open air. He kissed her hairline. Deal. A ping sliced the hush, email from Blaze's corporate counsel. Logan read it aloud, Hawthorne Industries offering to divest all Calvert-linked collateral, drop any claims, and pay undisclosed damages in exchange for a mutual non-disparagement clause. In lay terms, surrender. Bryony sank deeper against him, the fight draining at last. We don't sign away the right to tell the story, she murmured. Then we refuse the muzzle, Logan agreed. Let history stay loud. Rain softened to drizzle. She curled into his lap, tracing the seam of his shirt while streetlights cast bronze ripples across the ceiling. Battle still loomed, scaling hurdles, government audits, Roman's wounded pride, but for this hour the war paused, and in the stillness Bryony grasped a truth larger than capital. She had not fallen, she had flown, and the man whose heart beat against her cheek had matched her altitude without fear. Outside, a siren wailed then faded. Logan's fingers threaded with hers, pulse and purpose converging. Tomorrow they would draft counteroffers and hire safety officers and maybe apologize to Roman over coffee. Tonight they memorized the hush after storm surge, the sound of architecture holding, graphene strong, under the weight of possibility. Logan's alarm chimed at 5:15 a.m., but sweet 1703 beat it to consciousness. The whole room seemed to vibrate with the low-frequency hum of anticipation that only launch days or jury verdicts usually carry. Bryony's eyes opened to mottled twilight and the faint silhouette of her laptop, still aglow with a map of North America speckled by colored pins. Each pin marked a graphite-reinforced shipping container rolling toward Boston with frozen vials of N. glacialis, the graphene-weaving bacterium that had turned a private rebellion into a federally watched moonshot. She tried to reacquaint her bones with motion. Every muscle was a testimony to desk chair marathons and stress-induced sleeplessness. Logan, already vertical, padded from the kitchenette in NASA socks and a Harvard hoodie, juggling 2 mugs and an iPad that barked calendar alerts. Morning, Chairwoman, he said, voice gravel but warm. Today we christen Reactor Beta, woo a German venture syndicate, and sign the lease on a lab that doesn't serve $28 room service oatmeal. Also, the Wall Street Journal wants an exclusive. Bryony sat up, hair exploding in directions no boardroom hairstyle could hope to herd, and accepted the mug. No pressure to outdo yesterday's courtroom fireworks, then. She sipped. Logan had switched from coffee to oolong today, lower caffeine, steady burn. He noticed her surprise and shrugged. New phase, new fuel. They dressed in the careful haste of people front-loading resilience, deep green utility dress for her, chosen because the fabric hid coffee stains and projected command, for him, slate blazer over that same hoodie, an engineer's handshake to the suits he had to charm. By 6:10 they were downstairs, crossing the marble lobby where staff had begun treating them like local celebrities. The night manager discreetly slid a manila envelope across the counter, printouts of every slate-gray SUV that had idled outside since midnight. Blaze's goon reconnaissance had intensified. Thanks, Timothy, Bryony said, tucking the dossier under her arm. Document everything had become second nature. Iceforge's temporary headquarters occupied a leased biotech incubator on the Cambridge-Somerville border, a maze of wet labs and shipping crate offices that smelled of ethanol, solder, and hope. Someone had taped an index card to their suite's door: fortune favors the bold, graphene favors the cold. Inside, half a dozen staffers in beanies and nitrile gloves were already calibrating pumps for Reactor Beta's inaugural feed. At 7:02 the containment hood hissed open to accept the first vial. Logan performed the honor himself, lowering the cryotube with tweezers. The bioreactor's internal LEDs glowed aquamarine as nutrient broth flooded, and there was a collective intake of breath, like wedding guests waiting for the couple's first kiss. Then the screen flashed, colonization, 1%. Applause erupted, Logan's shoulders dropped an inch, relief visible. Bryony promised herself 5 seconds of celebration before confronting the next storm, and on cue, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown DC number, Logan read over her shoulder. Blaze found friends in high places. Or paid for them, she muttered. Will comply. Transparency or bust. He grinned crookedly. Let's make it bust-proof. They convened emergency stand-up around a whiteboard. Tasks fanned out like fractal branches, isolate a spare glove box for inspectors, print redundant assay data, line up 2 safety consultants for real-time testimony. Bryony added one more, secure comms. I don't want another leaked document ambush. A junior coder named Pippa raised a hand. I can spin up a zero-trust file vault in 30. Bryony nodded. Empowerment was the new org chart. At 10 o'clock the German syndicate arrived, 4 partners whose trench coats dripped slush onto the epoxy floor. They toured the bioreactor gallery, visibly impressed by live telemetry and Maeve Ellingson's safety certificates laminated on every bulkhead. But term sheet talk in the glass conference cube grew tense when the partners raised intellectual property sovereignty. Berlin wanted exclusive EU rights, Iceforge insisted on open licensing tiers. Logan deferred to Bryony with a glance that said your cockpit. She leaned in, fingers steepled. Gentlemen, cornering the EU undermines our climate impact thesis. Think Manhattan Project versus CERN, one raced to beat rivals, the other crowdsourced discovery. Which changed physics more? She let the analogy hang like charged air. The eldest partner, Braun, rubbed his beard. We take 2% less equity for non-exclusivity. 5, Bryony countered. And we provide your portfolio companies first-mover discounts. Braun gave a grudging nod. The handshake felt less like concession, more like shared gamble, which was all she'd hoped for. The FDA inspectors, 2 in navy windbreakers, 1 in a gray suit carrying a briefcase like a surgical kit, arrived precisely at 2:26. They swept through biosafety logs, asking pointed questions. The gray suit agent, Dr. Ashvin Patel, lingered longest at the cryogenic freezer, requesting genetic sequencing files dating back to Antarctica. Bryony supplied them, plus video of Maeve's assay. Yet Patel's skepticism didn't thaw. Your rapid scale-up risks mutation. We may mandate a production pause pending our own in-house culturing. That would sabotage contracts already in motion, Logan noted, tone carefully neutral. What's the statutory basis, given demonstrated BSL-2 compliance? Patel flipped open his briefcase, and Bryony's pulse spiked. Inside lay a dossier stamped Hawthorne Industries Confidential. Patel read a clause alleging derivative similarities between N. glacialis and a bacterium patented by Hawthorne Biodefense 2 years prior for military nanocomposite coatings. If Hawthorne convinced regulators of overlap, Iceforge could be tied up indefinitely. Bryony's vision tunneled, but Logan's voice cut through, calm, steel. That Hawthorne strain, B. hawthornii, is gram-positive with spore-forming loci. Ours is gram-negative, no sporulation, and its 16S rRNA identity diverges by 14%, far outside species thresholds. You'll find comparative data on the flash drive in your binder. Patel inserted the drive into a tablet. Sequence alignments bloomed, glaring mismatch. His jaw ticked, irritation or relief, hard to say. At 5:40 he convened a hallway debrief. Provisional finding, no substantial genetic homology. We'll file a no-action letter within 48 hours. Relief detonated down Bryony's spine. Logan shook Patel's hand, then led the entourage out. But satisfaction flickered only briefly, storms never left for long. Evening bled into violet when Logan's old Antarctic mentor, Dr. Miriam Wakefield, video-called, a pixelated backdrop of snow tractors and sun dogs behind her. Got your email. Impressive circus, kid, she chuckled. But the Germans aren't your only suitors. Boeing CTO pinged me for intel. Expect them to parachute negotiators soon. Guard your board seats. Logan nodded, promised diligence. After the call he slumped into an office chair, exhaustion overtaking posture. Bryony rolled a stool beside him. "How many fronts can we fight?" she asked. "As many as show up," he said, but the bravado rang hollow. She cupped his face, thumb brushing the blue shadows under his eyes. "You built this dream in whiteouts at the edge of the world. It's okay to pace yourself." He leaned into her palm, eyelids fluttering. "Only if pacing includes this." He tugged a small jewelry box from his jacket pocket and opened it, not a ring but a machined titanium key, stamped with Iceforge's logo. Lease signed. Lab with a balcony, as requested. Emotion surged, ridiculous tears welled. She laughed, took the key. "Our first co-owned asset that isn't a legal headache." His grin went boyish. "Come see it?" Night views pure sci-fi. They drove a company van across the Charles to an old textile mill converted into R&D lofts. Upstairs, glass garage doors opened onto a narrow terrace overlooking the river. Ice-crusted railings but the wind carried salt brine and February stars. Bryony stepped out, breath pluming, Boston's skyline blazing like a motherboard. Logan joined her, arms enveloping from behind. "When this ship sails international, we'll need bigger offices," he mused. She tipped her head against his. "When this ship sails, let's keep a balcony. For oxygen." He turned her around, kissed her slow, unhurried, no paparazzi, no attorneys. Just skin-warming metal key between her fingers. Below, commuter trains rattled, inbound jets traced silver arcs overhead. Bryony felt the city's pulse and hers align, not racing this time but steady, deliberate. Across the river, a Hawthorne drone advertisement flickered on a digital billboard, an irony she chose to interpret as epilogue. She broke the kiss, murmured into his collar, "Tomorrow we rewrite another chapter." "Tomorrow," Logan agreed, voice thick. "But tonight. Tonight we breathe," she finished. They stood at the railing until their coffee went cold, counting harbor lights and sketching futures that no longer required escape velocities, only sustainable thrust. Somewhere in a penthouse across town, Blaze Hawthorne cursed into an empty tumbler, his legacy unraveling like weak thread. Somewhere farther south, Roman Calvert opened a folder labeled Iceforge Calvert Bridge Fund, the first page stamped with a modest request, "Partner, not patron." And on that narrow balcony above the Charles, two renegade architects of the possible watched reactor telemetry scroll across Logan's phone, colonization 67.4%. The digits pulsed like a heartbeat, glowing blue on his screen and gold in their imaginations, promising that life, when cultured under courage and tempered by love, could weave miracles strong enough to sheath tomorrow's wings. The Monday after reactor beta reached full colonization, Cambridge awoke to the sort of crystalline cold that makes steel beams ping like tuning forks. In Iceforge's new riverside loft, Logan traced those faint metallic notes through the floor while he reviewed weekend email, Boeing's due diligence packet, a Harvard licensing agreement, and, far less welcome, a board meeting agenda circulated by the German syndicate. Item 3 read, "Proposal to elect additional independent directors to safeguard strategic interests." Corporate subtext, dilute the founders' voting power before the ink on their term sheet dried. Logan paced the balcony, phone pressed to his ear. "Bronze maneuvering," he told Bryony, who was still at the Peveril finishing relocation logistics. "If they add 2 independents aligned with them, they can overrule any open license policy." "Then we beat him to the punch," she said, already tapping keys. "Our bylaws let shareholders with 25% call a special vote, but we hold 32. File a notice for tomorrow at noon, our motion only." "That leaves 18 hours to convince the swing votes," Logan warned. "We will," Bryony replied. "And we'll live stream it. No room for backroom spins." By noon, Iceforge's mezzanine was a thicket of folding chairs, tripods, and trailing power cords. Maeve Ellingson perched on a lab stool, drafting last-minute slides about the bacterium's climate impact potential. Pippa rigged an Ethernet hardline to bypass any Wi-Fi glitches. Bryony arrived wearing a houndstooth blazer that managed to look both patrician and insurgent, laptop tucked like a sidearm. She pulled Logan aside. "I spoke to Braun privately," she murmured. "He wants EU exclusivity because he thinks US export controls will kill transatlantic supply. Offer him a 5-year tariff-free licensing bridge and he might drop the coup." Logan's brow furrowed. "That's an expensive concession. Not compared to losing mission control." She squeezed his hand. "Trust me." At exactly 12:05 the live stream began. Logan opened with reactor beta-S overnight metrics, graphene ribbons measuring 10 microns wide, tensile strength AAA 36 steel, then seeded the floor. Bryony stepped up, eyes scanning both the room and the red glow of the streaming cam. "Iceforge was founded on 3 pillars," she said. "Transparency, accessibility, and planetary benefit. Any governance change must uphold them." She outlined the new motion: expand the board by 1 seat only, reserved for a representative elected by non-US investors but bound to the existing open license charter. Global voice, global responsibility. As murmurs swelled, Braun conferred with his partners, then raised a hand. "Ms. Calvert, your tariff-free bridge, binding under WTO and EU competition law." "Drafted and ready," she replied, clicking a slide of the provisional agreement. "Our counsel worked through the night." Braun's hard gaze softened. He nodded once. When the vote was called, the resolution passed 68% to 32. The syndicate backed down, the extra hostile seat evaporated. Logan's shoulders dropped a centimeter, but he noted tension still on Bryony's face. "What's wrong?" he asked under applause. "Hawthorne just filed a FOIA request on our DOE negotiations," she whispered. "He's hunting for any federal procurement language he can twist." Logan gave a grim smile. "Then we give him nothing to twist." That evening, as sun flared bronze on the Charles, Bryony and Logan drove to Hanscom Field, where Boeing's advanced team awaited inside a chartered Gulfstream. The hangar smelled of jet fuel and polished ambition. Boeing's CTO, Sienna Brooks, greeted them with a handshake that felt like a power transfer. She wasted no words. "We want minority equity, no board seat, in exchange for guaranteed purchase of 20 metric tons of biographene annually for 10 years, she said, sliding a draft MAU across the conference table set up beside the aircraft. Logan blinked. That much volume would require 6 reactors the size of Beta. "And 50 million in capex," Bryony added. "Boeing will project finance the reactors," Brooks replied. "We're betting on you, de-risk our supply chain." It was the sort of deal founders dream about, capital plus marquee customer, but Bryony's heartbeat ticked a caution rhythm. "Why no board seat?" Brooks' smile was thin. "I answer to shareholders who see drones falling from the sky because of Hawthorne's falsified data. They want distance. But we do want an observer role. Acceptable?" Logan glanced at Bryony, silent dialogue compressed into half a breath. She nodded. "Observer, yes. Veto, no." "Done." Brooks tapped the table. "We'll courier final docs by dawn. And Ms. Calvert, some unsolicited advice? Finish closing your open flank. Hawthorne just hired Castor Moss." The name landed like a cold wave. Castor Moss, the reputation for hire firm infamous for deepfake compromat. Back at the loft, night had pooled into corners. Logan sat cross-legged on the balcony's cold concrete, scrolling a threat monitor feed. A new spike, a fringe blog posted a grainy clip purporting to show Bryony bribing the FDA inspector, audio clearly spliced. Pippa traced the upload to a server farm linked to Moss within minutes. Bryony joined him, blanket on her shoulders. "They'll keep forging until something sticks. Then we preempt." "Radical Transparency 2.0, Logan said. "Full archive of every inspection, contract, board meeting, open source the lot." "That's suicide in traditional playbooks." But survival in ours. He met her gaze. Give the public so much context no edit can skew it. She exhaled, the blanket fluttering. My mother used to say you can't blackmail a streaker. Exactly, Logan laughed. Let's streak, metaphorically. They spent the next 4 hours uploading PDFs, raw data, video files to a Git-based repository labeled iceforge_constellation. Twitter exploded, #RadicalCarbon trended, journalists praised the audacity. Castor Moss clip drowned in counterlinks to authenticated footage. By 3 a.m., even normally cynical tech forums posted memes of Hawthorne's logo evaporating under a graphene curtain. Exhausted, Bryony shut her laptop. We turned my scandal into a governance model, she said, incredulous. Logan pulled her close, forehead to hers. We turned fear into product, anger into fuel, and love into policy. That's systems engineering. She kissed him, slow, thankful. He tasted of mint gum and exhaustion, yet his arms felt inexhaustible. The city lights blurred behind him. Somewhere across town, Hawthorne lawyers drafted new gambits, but here, on a wind-cold balcony above a river whispering ice, two conspirators of possibility sealed a day's campaign with silence deeper than any gavel. When they finally crawled into the futon wedged between unopened moving boxes, Logan murmured against her hair, colonization reading. She smiled in the dark. 89.6%. Tomorrow we cross 90, he said, drifting toward sleep. And maybe we start designing the first full-scale ribbon mill. She threaded her fingers through his. Tomorrow we build what fear can't counterfeit. Outside, a freight train moaned across the drawbridge, carrying coal bound for power plants their graphene might soon obviate. Inside, reactor beta hummed in its stainless cradle, weaving a future molecule by molecule, much like the two improbable partners in the next room, stitching a new social fabric from courage, data, and a relentless refusal to be bought or broken. March sunlight flooded through the serrated skylights of Iceforge's new ribbon mill as though the building itself were a lens designed to concentrate hope. 6 weeks had passed since the night Bryony and Logan uploaded the Constellation archive, and the gamble had detonated exactly as they'd prayed. Castor Moss withdrew after its forged clips were picked apart on live streams. Hawthorne Industries bled contracts until the board suspended Blaze, then handed its drone portfolio to a restructuring firm. Boeing wired the first tranche of project finance capital, and Roman Calvert, humbled by the spectacle of radical transparency cushioning markets. Better than any backroom covenant, returned as a silent partner, 1 seat and 0 vetoes. Today marked a different milestone. Reactor Delta, a stainless titan 3 stories tall, was about to extrude the world's first commercial sheet of biographene. The mill's interior resembled a cathedral reimagined by a chemist, arcs of heat-treated glass, catwalks edged with cobalt guardrails, LED strips glowing azure against matte black fermenters. Above the main floor, a mezzanine had been cleared for the ceremony. Reporters clustered near a press wall embroidered with deep-field galaxy art and the Iceforge sigil. Logan stood at the control dais in a charcoal lab coat embroidered with the company's snowflake emblem, checking final telemetry. Colonization, 100%. Flow temperature, 4 degrees Celsius. He felt the numbers like pulse points under his fingertips. When the fused silica dies finally hissed open and a black mirrored ribbon began slithering along the take-up rollers, the whole hall fell into a hush almost holy. The sheet was translucent, yet it swallowed reflections like midnight water. 60 microns, Maeve Ellingson announced from a gantry, binocular calipers steady despite the tremor in her voice. And tensile load just hit 7 times steel. A roar crashed up the walls. Investors, graduate interns, patent lawyers, custodial staff, everyone who had spent nights rocking on deadlines, cheered as if the ribbon were a newborn, which in a sense it was. Bryony stepped to the dais. Today she wore no blazer, no battle armor, only a flight suit-cut jumpsuit of dark teal, sleeves rolled, safety goggles settled against her temples like a pilot preparing ascent. When Logan met her eyes, the world's noise dimmed to a subaudible hum. She took the mic. 3 months ago, she began, people called this project reckless. They were correct. Progress is reckless, reckless with complacency, reckless with scarcity, reckless with the calculus that says one life is a fair trade for another's convenience. If we've learned anything since that first flannel shirt selfie, it's that the antidote to coercion is collaboration so public no gatekeeper can ransom it. She gestured toward the rolling sheet. In 10 minutes this ribbon will be diced into sample kits bound for every materials lab that applied through the Constellation portal, whether they paid us or not. The licensing clock starts when the last box is stamped, because science doesn't wait for paperwork. Applause thundered, and Logan felt his throat tighten in ways that had nothing to do with engineering. He took the mic, thanked the crews, announced grant matches for high school research programs, then glanced sideways at Bryony and deviated from the prepared notes. "One more thing," he said, voice rougher than rehearsed. "When we filed our first bylaws, Bryony scribbled a margin note, 'Love is a mission-critical system.' At the time, I thought she was being poetic. Turns out she was just writing specs." Bryony's brows arched, surprised. Logan reached into his coat and produced a slim object, not a ring box, but a graphene wafer the size of a credit card, laser-etched with constellations and a single line, "Build impossible things with me." He offered it. "I don't have a diamond," he said, words quickening, "because pressure doesn't make our kind of carbon. Collaboration does. So, Bryony Calvert, will you co-found the rest of my life?" Gasps rippled through mezzanine rails. Bryony's eyes shimmered comet-bright. "Only if the share structure is 50-50, she replied, laughter catching at the edges of tears. "Agreed." He slipped the wafer into her palm. The hall erupted, technicians whistled, journalists forgot decorum, Maeve dabbed her goggles on her sleeve. Somewhere a confetti cannon, meant for demo photos, fired early, scattering silver ribbons that drifted down like slices of moonlight. They escaped to the roof afterwards, leaving balloons and bored gossip behind. Boston stretched west in glacial noon light, the Charles gleaming pewter. Down on the loading dock, crates labeled ribbon #001-016 were forklifted into waiting electric trucks. Each movement below looked small but seismic, like tectonic plates slipping into a kinder alignment. Bryony inhaled wind that smelled of snowmelt and magnesium. "I thought victory would taste like champagne," she said. "Turns out it tastes like air that finally belongs to everyone." Logan folded her into his arms, forehead to hers. "Champagne later. For now, oxygen is underrated." "Do you think fear will mutate, come back stronger?" she asked, half serious. "Yes," he answered, equally honest. "Fear always replicates. But so does courage. And transparency is the best antiviral we've found." They stood there watching a future unfurl, literal sheets of it sliding into crates, and Bryony found herself humming a tune her mother used to sing during pre-flight checks, minor key, fierce cadence, a lullaby for reckless hearts. Logan felt the vibration against his chest and recognized, for the first time, the answer to a question that had haunted him since Antarctica: what if the next frontier isn't latitude or orbit, but the bandwidth between two humans daring to trust? He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Ready to draft the Ribbon Mill safety manual, co-founder?" "Ready," she said, curling her fingers around the graphene wafer. "And after that we outline the reception menu. Roman insists lemon cheddar scones must feature." Logan laughed, the sound carried off by rooftop thermals. Below, the first truck eased through the security gate, destination MIT, while its sibling queued for a Southside vocational school that had won the open call lottery. On distant harbor water, tugboats honked like jubilant geese. And high above them, along an invisible arc of probability now ever so slightly altered, the future plotted new trajectories, ones measured not merely by GDP or patents, but by the tensile strength of promises kept when no contract could compel them. In that widening sky, Bryony saw the next impossible thing waiting to be built and felt no dread, only the restless joy of someone who knows the runway lights are lit, the engines are spooling, and the co-pilot beside her speaks fluent audacity.